All right, hello and welcome to part 2 of our super fun cover design DIY, how to make your cover look great, whether you're actually doing it yourself or working with a cover designer with Stephanie Anderson of Alt19 Creative. She is back this week. If you haven't watched part 1, in part 1 she started a design for Tammy Winbush, who is a new romance author who's going to have a book out in 2024 and a member of the Author Ever After community. And so Stephanie started that and is going to show us how she's going to finish that up with us today. And maybe not finish, but at least the process for taking a really rough idea and turning it into something that we can use to publish our books. So over to you, Stephanie. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me once again. I will tell you, I've had one of those hot mess weeks this week, but I do have something to show you. I was hoping to present two options to Tammy, but we'll get that other option done today. Just a little bit of humor, and for some of you who are close to my age, you may understand. If you noticed last week, you may say, what is wrong with your glasses, Stephanie? Okay, so here are my normal glasses. I can't see you. This is bad. These have progressive lenses because I'm half blind. I've got that vision now where I need close up and far away. I can't see my computer with these, so I've relied on these old glasses that are missing the arm. So if you wonder why my glasses are all cockeyed, sometimes that's why. So well, that's the only way I can see my computer.
I have to pop in and say, so I just, right before we went live, I took off an earring. See, where is it? There's a lovely little earring, which I wear in this ear, and I only have one ear pierced, but one of the members, Ashley, said it was really distracting in a meeting that you only had one earring. And so I should have kept it in. I could have had my one earring, you could have had your one arm, and we could probably brand this as something silly, like the middle-aged women's
issues for
whatever.
Sure. Okay. So if you haven't gotten there with your eyes yet, I hope you never do, because it's not fun. So trying to be able to see when I'm used to being able to see however I want, it's just kind of bad. So anyway, all right, for what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Now, one of the things that we talked about last week is the importance of looking at the bestsellers and the hot new releases in your genre and trying to identify trends. Sometimes the trends are in typography. Sometimes the trends are in the type of imagery used on the cover. And the ones that we looked at that we felt were apparent with Tammy's area is that there were some vector, cartoon is not the right word. A lot of people call them cartoon, but it's the vector style illustrated covers as well as photo covers. So what I've done so far is I've played around with a photo cover, and I did record that process. And once I get that saved out to YouTube, I'm going to send Danny here the link to that, so you can go back and watch how I got to the end product. And I'm going to show you a little bit about it now, but there were a lot of steps that were involved in that got me to this end product that I won't go over in detail, but we'll look at the different layers of what I have right now. So we're going to start with that first, and then we're going to look at an illustrative cover, and then we're going to see how much time we have left, because as you know, if you were here last week, I can be a little bit long-winded. So first thing, when we left last week, we started looking at images. And I continued. I have a recording on going through all the images that I looked at and why I chose these particular images for this cover. And I'm going to start off showing you the images that I'm playing around with. So give me 1 second. I haven't shared my screen yet, have I? So let's go ahead and do that. Where are we? We're going to be right here, share screen. Okay, so when I start searching for images, I'm a very kind of visual person. And although most image sites will allow you to create a light box for all the images you like, what I typically do is I come out and just save the images and drop them into like a program that will allow me to move them around and see kind of what I like about the images. So I mainly looked for a pregnant couple, but I also wanted to find one that maybe showed a little bit of tension in it. And so these first two images were a little bit too light, and they were a little bit too loving. And then I found that these images right here, which had fabulous color. I love the sunlight coming through. And although this image was a little bit too sweet, this one at the bottom, this was a little bit too sweet. She had a big smile. They looked very loving. These other two showed a little bit of tension in their pose. She's looking to the left here. She's got a slight smile. So there's a bit of, not a lot, but a little bit of tension that can hint at some sort of story there. And then this one here as well, this one could show a little bit of tension as well. And with the great title that Tammy has for this book, with that look of the couple, even though they're embracing, with the title, it can create, hey, there might be a little bit of drama in this book. Let's see what this is about. And that's what you really, really want. I wanted to, because we were talking about doing a split cover where we have a couple on front and a scene below. I wanted to find another image that would work. And since this book was, I believe, in the fall, and it was in upstate New York, I looked for some images that were upstate New York. I believe this is a park in upstate New York. And it had kind of the same color tones, the same kind of fall look. So I opted to work with these two images. And the great thing about stock images is you can make them look different than what they are. Okay, so I want you to keep in mind what these two stock images looked like and how it was incorporated into this cover right here. Okay, so we have the path background and then we have the couple here. Okay, so now keep in mind this isn't 100% finished. But this gives you an idea of the composition that we can go for, where we have the couple up top, and then we have the kind of nice scene with the leaves below. Now we're going to go into a little bit of what is too much. So you may look at this and you may say, hey, Stephanie, this is a little busy. How can we tone it back? Now, I am a busy person. That's kind of my style. But when I have a client who maybe doesn't like things as busy, we can definitely tone it back because we have a lot going on here. So Tammy, if you wouldn't mind, give me your initial reaction, whether you hate it, love it, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Let me know what your initial reactions is. If I sent you an email and say, hey, here is a first rough draft cover concept, let me know your thoughts.
I was like, oh, because this is awesome. I love it.
Great, great. Love to hear that.
Love that.
Good. Do you feel like the couple presents enough tension? And I know we need to make his hair a little bit blonder. Her hair looks a little bit lighter than his right now. So we're going to, in the final version, we would kind of cross that over. But do you feel the couple, it doesn't have to match them exactly, but as long as it gives the same overall vibe of the couple?
I'm wondering if he looks tortured enough, for lack of a better term.
Okay.
Because he's had to get to a pretty significant part before he can get to be this close to her.
Okay. So more tortured, and we can do that with a change of facial expression. So right now he's got that a slight smile. So there's things that we can do that maybe we can make his expression a little bit less serene and a little bit more troubled. Okay, so that's great feedback. All right, so I'm going to kind of walk you through how I got here first. Because if we look back to the two images, we've got this one and we've got this one. And that's how we came up with this one. So in Photoshop, the great thing is I work in layers. So we can turn everything off. Let me label some stuff here so I know. All right, we can turn everything off and I can show you how we got here. Okay. So in Photoshop, we have a process that we do of building layers, okay? Now, there are programs such as Canva that you can do some of this, but probably not to this level. So depending on what software you use is really going to determine how detailed you can get in all this. However, layers is pretty common. And layers, basically, it's where you're stacking things on top of each other. So let's say you have a stack of papers. And with the layers, we can take those stack of papers and do different things to them, which will determine how they interact with the layer below. Okay. So I started, if you recall, the image that we had last week was a beautiful cover that was purples and pinks, and it had a image of a couple up top with a mountain, watercolor mountain scene down below, and a compass kind of look to it. And it was that split screen, the split cover. And so that's kind of I wasn't copying that. I used that as inspiration. So what I wanted to do initially is we wanted to start with like a paper texture at the very bottom. And so that's what you see here is this parchment. And since this is fall, I really wanted to stick with warm colors with one pop of a cool color. And we'll show that in a minute. And then the next thing I did is I added another layer of paper. And this kind of almost resembles bark, you could see. And the whole point of adding this layer, and you don't really notice it, it's very subtle in the cover, but it's meant to give these kind of distressed lines in it. And that kind of brings the amount of tension. You know, there's trouble, there's little valleys in the story that we go through. And so that is the purpose of having that layer on top of the other one. And so you can't really see, it's very subtle. Here it is with it out, and here it is with. And so it just gives a little, you know, a little grunge to it, just so it's not as clean. And I think that just kind of ties in with the story. Here is our one image, and I went through several. What I did to this is the original image, and in the version here, I just placed it and erased certain areas of that image to interact with that paper background, just so we can see that texture coming through. And then here is the image of our couple. And again, the same thing. I erased certain parts of it just to have that interaction with the background. And then we added some leaves on top of that. Okay, so that's how we got our initial composition. And you can see what started out as two images is now a combination of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 images all combined together. And that's how we can take a stock image and create our own composition out of it. So if you see a stock image that you like, think about how you can make it not look like that stock image. Because what's going to happen is there's so much stock out there. People have a tendency to use the same couples or the same men on their covers. And so you'll start to see the same photos across multiple images. And if you just use the image, how is it unique? How is it your own? So think about what you can bring to the table. A lot of it is through color. And when I flip back into the cover, you're going to see a couple of things that I did to create a more cohesive color theme with this. So sticking with the fall and the warm colors is what I did. And you can add like the leaf overlays. There's something called bokeh lights that just adds shimmers to photos. You'll see that's very common on a lot of romance covers. There's a lot of grunge elements, a lot of grunge overlays that you can do to it. So think out of the box. Think about what things you can add that are going to highlight certain elements of your cover. So we're going to close this down now that we've looked at the layers. So this was my initial composition. So we had the walk, the pathway, which I think is significant because if you think of a path, they're going on this path. And the cool thing I thought about this photo is that you're going on this path and then you kind of go behind this rocky wall. So there's some imagery that could be relevant to the story as they're going through this path, and they're the goal is how to get to the end of the path and where's it going to take them, and we can't see that in this image. So I think that kind of adds, there's a lot of little nuances that you can put in your cover that nobody maybe even noticed, but they're there. Okay, so I started off with this, and what I did is sometimes you can take the same image, duplicate it, and overlay that same image, do a little bit of work to it, and overlay it on top. So what I did is I took that same image and I went through a set of actions that I have that creates kind of a painterly soft feel to a photo. So I want you to see, here is the before. So we see a lot of green tones. The colors are a little bit not all cohesive. And so what I did is I created that painterly look and I softened the image. I softened some of those greens so they're not so prominent. And we created a softer image here. I'm going to show you another thing. Here is that image amped up. This is the painterly look of that image, amped up to 100%. We have no greens now. And although this is nice, you may like this look, and that's okay. You could easily go with this. I wanted to soften it to bring back the original image just a little bit. So I brought the opacity of this layer down to 50%. So here it is without, and here it is with. So that just kind of creates a painterly, softer, more romantic look, since this is a romantic book. Okay. Then what I did is we added text to it. Okay. So I'm going to show you what my text layers look like. I am really big. One of my things is I like mixing different typography. And it's very popular with romance books as well. I like to bring in either a sans serif font or a serif font. So this sometimes isn't enough, is kind of in what I would call a distressed sans serif font, where the edges are a little bit kind of rough, which I feel kind of ties in with the story. And then I actually had it, and this is another thing that you can take away. I'm going to show you what you can do with your type is you can add elements on top of your type to give them a little bit more dimension or interest. Right now, I have this type layer set to a 75% opacity. So what that means is that some of the image below comes through the text, which creates a little bit more of a cohesive cover where your type really kind of ties in with your cover. I'm going to show you what it looks like without, and you can definitely do it without, but it just brings the type a little bit more in the forefront. So that's just a matter of style, and whether you like it or not. That's that there's one way isn't over the other, I guess you could say. And then what I did is I'm going to show you what this looks like. We're going to remove, and a lot of programs will allow you to do what I'm about to show you. So this right here, let me see if I can find it. Okay, let me release this clipping mask. And I'm going to show you. So this image right here is just a watercolor. Okay. So this is just a watercolor paper, and that's how we can add interest to our text. So what I did here is, and a lot of programs, they allow you to do what's called a clipping mask. Okay. So I put that layer of watercolor over this word enough. and it creates a little bit of dimension to that type. And I also, if you look at the opacity, I reduced it to 50%. So this is what it would look like. That's a little bit too bright, a little bit too neon. So we want to take some of that off. And that's why I brought the opacity down to 50%. So I did that with all of these letters. It's on sometimes, let me take this back up. Nope, wrong layer. You'll get lost in your layers sometimes. So there we go. Got to turn them all back on. Okay. So you can decide whether you like that or not. Here's what it looks like with, and here's what it looks like without. And then we can go back and soften those layers so the you can tell mainly right here with his shirt and the pattern in her shirt. His shirt and her dress, you can see that pattern come through on those layers, and that just adds a little bit of visual detail and interest to that. So you can determine whether you like it with the overlay or without. If we did without, I would probably bump up the color just a touch. Right now, it is this kind of light yellow kind of cream color, and just playing with the color will bump it up. So if we take it a little bit more to white, that helps pop the letters out even more. And definitely, as you're designing things, it's important to take a step back at this angle and look to see what it looks like in a thumbnail. Okay, very, very important. Why do we want to look at it in thumbnail? It's because we want to know what our cover is going to look like on KDP. I'm sorry, on Amazon, along with all those other covers. So when we look at it in thumbnail, we want to make sure we can still see the gist of the title. So we can still read it. The title still stands out. And we still see the couple, which are the most important elements. And then when we bring it back to a larger size, I feel like it's a perfect representation at larger size as well as thumbnail. So those are important things to do. And we're just going to, and you may say, well, why do you have this love in this kind of blue color? I'm going to show you what it looks like in not the blue color. We're going to use the same color as everything else. And I added the blue just to give it visual interest. So here it is around the same color as sometimes isn't enough. And I just didn't like that. I really wanted love to pop out because this is a romance. You know, this is about love. We have two people on there. How are they going to get to the end? And so that's why I added this kind of teal blue color. And you may say, Stephanie, why did you choose that color? Well, a lot of this cover is kind of orange and warm colors. We have a lot of orange and yellow and red. And the complementary color to orange is blue. So blue and orange, you'll see a lot of sports teams that are blue and orange. Red and green are complementary colors. We know that is a holiday, a Christmas color theme. And they are on opposite ends of the color wheel. And that means they're complementary. That means those colors can work really, really well together. And so that's why I went with this tealish blue to complement all those orange tones, which helps that love pop out. So does that make sense to people? So color theory is a whole world. I could do an 8-hour course on color theory, and we're not going to do that today. But if you ever want to learn a little bit about color theory, there are plenty of YouTube videos out there, and they can really, color is a really good tool to use in your cover design and learning what colors work together. It does take an eye, but you can train your eye to those colors and how they work. Okay, so that's why I went with the blue. Now, can we get a vote here? Show of hands. Do you like it with, or y'all can type in the chat if you want. Do you like it with the this orange kind of watercolor overlay, or do you like it without? I'm curious to know. With, okay. With, all right.
And the author likes it with, so that's
all right. That's great. So we will keep it with. A lot of the things you will learn is that, you know, some people may like it without, but it looks like everybody likes it with. So some of it is not about design theory or design concepts. It's really about your own personal aesthetic. Okay. So don't be afraid to try those kind of things, and don't be afraid to try them, then turn them off. All right. Now, another thing.
I just want to pop in and say, I have learned so much here that will make me feel less stressed about asking for changes from my cover designer, because I can see how you're doing it, and that it may not be easy, but it's not a 15-minute job to change a color. It's quick, and getting options.
Yeah. I'm huge on that, and I'm so glad you said that, because that makes me feel really, really good. That also too, when you're working with a cover designer, sometimes you have to learn how they work and how they think. If you have a cover designer who's real set in their ways, and they do certain things a certain way, and they think there's only one way to do things then that can be a little difficult when you're trying to get them to do slight tweaks. But most cover designers, I feel, are not going to be that way. They're going to allow you to make those small tweaks. Also, too, something to think about: will that small tweak, in the grand scheme of things, how much will it change the cover? So sometimes you have to think about when is enough, kind of that thing. So that's something to think about as well. I'm the type that I want to work on something until I know you're happy. But then once we come to a certain point, if I feel like you're being a little nitpicky about certain things that are not going to change the cover in the grand scheme of things, I will say, hey, I think we've reached that point. Let's start kind of button this up, so we're just, not doing those little nitpicky things. So that is something to think about. All right, now I'm going to show you one quick thing that I think can really take your typography to another level. And I'm going to show you. Let me think. It's right here. All right, so I'm going to turn this layer off. Okay, so you'll notice, I want you to pay attention to the word love. It's behind all the other type now. I'm going to turn this layer back on, and you'll see parts of love are now on top of some of the type. So I've done that by duplicating the word love. And there is something called a mask that you can do. And with masks, you can add that mask on top of a layer. So we have added it on top of the word love that's on the very top of all the text. And we use a black brush to erase part of that word. And so now the word love kind of weaves in and out of all the words in the title. And so that interaction produces a lot of dynamic and kind of interaction with everything. And I love it when cover designers do that, because that adds some visual interest to your title. So think about little things like that you can do to really take it to the next level. Okay. Now, type is another one. It's kind of like color. It's another one of those subjects that we can talk about forever. I am the type of cover designer, when we have a long title like this, I like to use what we call duo fonts, or two fonts that work well together. Don't go overboard with your fonts. The general rule is you do not want more than 3 font faces on your cover. Some people will even push it to 2. But for this cover, I have 3. I have Tammy's name just in a very simple, clean sans serif font. Now, if you don't know the difference between serif and sans serif, we'll do a quick lesson on that real quick. So a sans serif is basically a straight font. It's Arial, probably the most common, Helvetica and Arial. This is called Below, which I think is a very kind of beautiful font. It has just nice clean lines to it. And then we have what's called sans serif. So sans means without. Okay, so a sans serif is without serifs. So what are serifs? Well, Adobe Garamond is a great serif font. And what serifs are, some people call them the fingers and toes of letters. It's where we have these little additional fingers and toes on our characters. And so you'll see a lot of serif fonts done for your books. The type on the inside that you can choose to read is typically a serif font because reading long blocks of text, serif fonts are usually the best. So for your author name, you can choose to either set your name in one of the fonts that you used for the title, or you can choose like a serif font or a sans serif font. What a lot of indie authors do is that they pick one font to use across all their covers, and they call it their branding font. Some people do that, some people don't, so that's up to you. You could always work with a cover designer to come up with a good branding font if you decided to use that. And the point of doing that is that so when people see book covers, they can start identifying your book based on how you did the fonts. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples, because there are some authors with some great branding fonts. And if you are familiar with Melanie Harlow, you will know she has a great branding font, but she went with a script. So every single one of her covers has her name in this script. So if you've ever read Melanie Harlow, if you've ever seen book covers of Melanie Harlow, you're probably very familiar with that branding font that she has. Let's look at another, Elena Johnson. She has, Liz Isaacson, that's one of her pen names. This font that she sets all her covers in for Liz Isaacson is called Trajan. And so that is her branding font for Liz Isaacson. So if we look at her covers, you'll notice that her name is this one's a little different. Her name is mostly the same across all her covers. So that is her branding font. So if you do a lot of covers and you want some cohesion between your covers, you can always come up with a branding font for your name. So, something to think about. All right, now back to the type. Romance covers, very popular to mix a script and either a serif and a sans serif. A lot of times people struggle with finding the right two combinations of fonts to bring together. So I'm going to give you a little trick on what I think is the best way. You want two fonts that have a little bit of contrast between each other. So you'll notice that the sometimes isn't enough. It's more of a thick font. It's a little bit heavier. And that's why we have it a little bit smaller than Love, whereas Love is a little thinner. And so we have good contrast between the two. But because I put Love in a different color and I made it bigger, it's creating even more contrast between those two. So contrast between your two fonts is very important. Now, the best trick to figuring out what font combinations to use is go to a website where you get fonts from and just type in Duo, okay? Easy peasy. We have font designers who design fonts that are meant to work well together. Okay, so I have a subscription to a website called Envato Elements. If you do a lot of graphic work, this is a great website to have a subscription to. I think for a full year, it's anywhere between $100 to $150. So you're talking about $10 to $12 a month. And I think they had a deal for Black Friday where you could get it even cheaper. So this is a great resource to have if you do a lot of your own graphics. This particular site, you have access to stock videos, to music. So if you put together any movie reels or anything related to your books, they have the videos and the music that you can do that with. They have sound effects, and they have tons of different graphics, tons of different photos, which is good. They also have a whole collection of fonts and then some add-ons that you can add on to Photoshop or Procreate, whatever programs you decide to use. And I just think it's a great resource. So I particularly like it for the fonts because there are so many fonts out there, and font prices range. You can get some for free. There's tons of great Google fonts that are free. You just need to make sure that they are commercial fonts. Pretty much any Google font is what is known as an open source font. So it's going to have a free commercial license to it. So you can use any Google font on anything commercial. So that's important to note. Most of these websites that offer fonts, such as Envato Elements, these are all going to be commercial fonts. If you go to websites like DaFont, where you can download fonts for free, they are a mixture of commercial and personal use fonts. So you really have to pay attention to the font to make sure it is not a personal use font, because you can get yourself in trouble. You can get a lawsuit thrown at you, and we don't want that. So make sure whatever font you use is a commercial font. Now, a lot of those websites like DaFont, they have personal use only fonts, but if you look in the information that the particular font designer provided, they will let you know whether they have a commercial version of that personal font. You'll just have to go buy it. Sometimes fonts are cheap. It may only be $5. There's some fonts out there that are hundreds of dollars. So think about that. The great thing about using a site such as Envato, as long as you have a membership to that site, you can continue to use that font. Now, if you cancel your membership from that point on, you can continue using it in all the graphics that you've already prepared. But once you cancel your membership, you're not supposed to use it in any new graphics. So that's something to think about. If you don't want any sort of membership related to fonts, if you go to a website called Creative Market, you can typically download fonts anywhere between 10 to 20 bucks a font. So,
Steph, I have a question for you. So I'm hiring you, and I'm trusting that you're using fonts that are licensed for commercial use.
Yes.
How do I need to do anything as an author to protect myself?
Just to make sure that your cover designer, it's always good to check. Say, hey, let me know what fonts you used and where I can purchase them at. And I would just always go through and double check to make sure that they are commercial use fonts. Now, I will tell you a couple stories. I have, when I started in this business, I mainly did interior formatting for a lot of nonfiction books. So a lot of times I would be working with a cover designer, and I would ask them, hey, I want some fonts for the interior to complement and match the font for the cover. So can you let me know what font you use for the cover? Or I would try to figure it out myself. There were several cases of professional cover designers who use personal use only fonts on book covers. So it's always good to double check. If you're working with someone like me who takes that stuff very seriously, you don't have to worry about things like that. This is what I do. I'm going to show you real quick what I do when I do a cover for a client. Let me see what we have.
While you're doing that, Dr. J says her IT attorney says to get a contract from designers that identify their licenses for you.
Yes, for sure. That's what I've pulled up whenever I work with a client. And this is the same kind of, definitely, that's great advice. Dr. J, I love your name. Definitely ask for that contract or ask for the licensing. Never hesitate to ask them where they got their images. That's another thing. You want to make sure that those images are not from free sites. You want to make sure that the images, if there are any characters or any people in that image, that there has been model release form signed. So those things are very important. Now, when I do a cover for somebody, when we're finished, I give them this kind of summary of what it was, what the cover looked like. I give them information on the fonts that were used. Okay, so for this particular cover, the title was done in a font called Font Brush. And I mentioned that this font was downloaded through Alt19 Creative's monthly subscription to Envato Elements. I also told this client where she can go and download the font, a paid version of the font for herself, so she could use that with any type of graphics. And then I also tell her what font her author name was set in, which was Below, which is ironically is the same font we're using for Tammy. So can you tell I love it? And then I tell her where she can get that as well. This particular font was from Adobe Fonts. So I have access to it through my subscription with Adobe. And then what I do is I have just this statement on what was a part of this cover. If there were images in this cover, I would let this client know where I got those images. But for this particular cover, this was all hand drawn. So she has 100% exclusive rights to these images because I hand drew them for her. But if I had used images, I would show her what stock sites that those images came from. And it's important to ask for that just to cover yourself. We've heard errors. Now, I haven't known anybody personally to be asked this by KDP, but I've heard stories where KDP has gone to an author and says, hey, do you have rights? Do you have a license to use this cover? If so, you need to give us, that your license to use this cover, and then we can, and otherwise we're going to, cancel, we're going to remove this book from our system. So I've heard people do that. I've never known KDP to ask anybody that I've worked with. So just always cover yourself. Asked about the fonts and asked about any images used. Now, if you work with a reputable cover designer, they're going to give that information willingly. We've heard some nightmares of cover designers on Fiverr who just basically steal images and they don't care. So always double check, make sure you get that information. And like Dr. J said, always get a contract that states that specific information. Okay. All right. Now back to fonts. Envato Elements. Let's say you were looking for a nice Duo font. I'm just going to search Duo, and here we are, all of these great fonts that work together. So I'm showing you this one because this is the one I actually used on Tammy's cover. This particular font, there's, I think, 6 different fonts, and you can see how well they work together. We have a script font, and then we have a sans serif font. And we have different versions of the sans serif font. There's a clean, an edge, and a stamp. And as I mentioned, I did the edge version, so it gives a little bit of grunginess to it. And the cool thing about these sites is they can give you some really good ideas on type and how to use your type. So this is a cool design where it has the script font in white, and it's a little distressing to it. And then it has the font duplicated in yellow. So this is a really cool idea that you could mimic on a cover, and it can give you some good ideas on how to lay out your type together on a cover. Always look at those examples because they can be very, very inspirational. Okay. So that is the font option that we went with. And again, we can change this font. So if Tammy came back to me and said, hey, I like the font, but I don't love it, I would present more options to her just so I could learn what kind of font style she likes. Maybe this is a little bit too distressed. So I would take it to a little bit of softer look. Now I like this. I hope Tammy likes this. And when I get done here, I'm going to send her this and she can provide me more feedback about it. Okay, so that's about fonts. And then let's see, other things that I added. And this is where you can say you like it or don't like it. But I wanted to add a little bit special kind of designs to it, just to add a little bit of interaction to it. And these are the type of things that you can tone down. So you'll notice behind the L, I have this just graphical element. And I'm going to show you what those looked like. This is all these images were. They're just little fleur-de-lis kind of, they kind of have the same feel as the leaves on top. And I just wanted to add a little bit more interest to the cover. And so these are the type of things you can add or take away. And I set these all in different what's called blending modes. So all these different blending modes. Now, a lot of programs will have these different types of blending modes. And so you can play with them. And that just basically changes how that particular image interacts with the background. So I took the opacity down of these and it's very, very subtle. And it's just meant to add a little bit of interest to the cover. And I think it really adds to it. Now, it's another thing that you can say you want to keep it or you don't. So quickly tell me if you like it with these elements or without. So just type in the comments
like
with
them.
or without. Good.
Oh, I thought you were talking to me specifically.
Anybody. Your opinion matters too, very much. So this is one. So we have some with and we have some without. So again, that's another area that's really about personal interest. Busy or not busy. I don't think it's busy, but I am a person who's known to like a little bit more detail. I'm not a clean and crisp person at all. But if you didn't like it quite so bright, we can play with the opacity. So originally I had the opacity at 50%. It's now 25%. So it's even more subtle, but it still gives that interest. Okay. All right. So there we go. That's this cover to a T. So we're going to stop this. Any questions? Any comments?
Let's stop sharing. We can see everybody's face.
Okay, that'll be great.
That was fantastic. Like I said, I feel so empowered now to talk to cover designers without feeling guilty, and not to take it too far, but just to have that understanding of what goes into how they make that. Because to me, it's a big black box. I know how to. You're going to be jumping into Canva now, right?
We can work in Canva if you want.
I was going to say, I've figured out some things in Canva. Yes, I told people that would be showing them how to jump into Canva and DIY. So hopefully you'll be able to do a little bit of that.
We'll do the next cover with the with the illustrations that I found to create an illustrated cover. So we'll work on Canva for that.
Okay, cool. Next. But anyway, what about other folks? Pop in, you can come off camera if you're not on, or just use your voice. Let us know what value you got.
This has just been enormously helpful and makes me feel lots less scared of any of this stuff. So thank you. Thank you.
I am so glad to hear that. That's why I'm here.
Dea says it makes me miss using Photoshop. Well, then I guess you're going to have to renew your subscription to Photoshop, Dea.
Well, that's why we're going to move on to Canva. Now, I will tell you, I am not as equipped in Canva All right, let me figure out. I have a lot. I'm trying to log into Canva at the same time. I am not as equipped in Canva because I mean, I use Photoshop for everything, and I've been using Photoshop since the 90s, so I'm pretty well versed in it. I'm very comfortable with it. Photoshop has a huge learning curve. So there are products such as Canva. There's another one by Adobe. I think it's called Adobe Express, maybe, but it works the same way as Canva does. There's one called BookBrush. And they all do the same things. Basically, you don't need any software to use them. It works in your web browser for the most part. With Canva Pro, you have access to a bunch of different graphics. There has been some people talk about Canva Pro graphics and where they come from. So there's a little bit of kind of questioning there. So I believe Canva allows you to import your own graphics.
Yes, you can.
So that is probably what I would advise you to do. Find graphics for. I will tell you, there is a stock image site called Deposit Photos. A lot of people use it. Right now, they have subscription services. They also have where you can buy a pack of images for a certain dollar amount. Twice a year, they do a sale via a website called AppSumo. So that's AppSumo, where you can buy a pack of images from them, 100 images for $40, which is a deal because usually you can, I think if you go directly to their website, it's like 100 images for $100. So that's like less than half. So if you buy just a pack of 100 images, if you only use a couple a month, hey, that's going to last you all year. And you can use those images in any marketing graphics. You can use them for your covers, social media, whatever you want. So that's always a great deal. And Deposit Photos, you'll notice when you spend a lot of time on these stock sites, a lot of photos, you may see one photo on Shutterstock. Chances are that photo may also be on Deposit Photos because these photographers and these artists will upload their images to a whole bunch of different stock sites. So you can find most images across all stock sites. So Deposit Photos is probably going to be your most economical deal when it comes to images. So if you're going to use Canva, I would recommend using your own images.
And if you are a member of the Author Ever After community, I have purchased that deal so many times. I'm I'm happy to share those licensed photos with you, as long as, that if it's not going to be for your cover at this point. And if you buy just a single image, I think right now they're about $5. So that's still a great deal if you want to give that to your cover designer.
There you go.
Photos. All right.
And speaking of that kind of stuff too, that's some things that some people do is they actually will buy an image and give it to their cover designer to use. That's another way you can guarantee that they're going to use an image that has the right licensing. So let me try to log into Canva. It's funny. Should have already had this, but yeah, feel free to ask me any questions while I'm getting this logged in and set up. Anybody else? So
Tammy, why don't you, while Stephanie's getting set up, what changes do you anticipate you're going to ask for? Do you want his face to be a little less happy? What other changes?
Yes, a little less happy. Down with the word enough. The added zhuzh, whatever you want to call it.
Zhuzh is great.
Zhuzh. It was just a little bit too there, but I think you toned it down there at the end, so that was good.
Okay.
But you're loving the cover.
I do.
It on #1. That's fantastic.
Yep, so far so good.
Great.
Just need to change his little face. Yeah.
I look forward to we'll have to upload somehow with this recording the final cover. Well, I know we'll just link to your book for sale on retailers,
you go.
Tammy,
There you
and
go.
then people will be able to compare the face that Stephanie is able to adjust. That will be fun.
All right, so give me a minute. Canva is not liking me right now, so let me give this number.
So I know recently one of the other members, Ashley, was having trouble with the cover designer that she hired finding the right guy. So she found, like you were just saying, she found a stock image, but it was an expensive one, and then was able to go and find it again on a site where it was not expensive. So that was between, I think, was it iStock and iPhoto or something like that, Ashley? You don't have to.
Yeah, Getty Images is probably the most expensive stock site, but you can sometimes find their images on iStock Photo as well, because they own iStock Photo. So depending on the image, you may find it cheaper in certain places. It really depends on how exclusive it is. If you want an image where no one else can use it, you're talking about exclusive images, and those can get in the several thousands. And there are some photographers out there who specialize in book photography, and some you may get as cheap as $250. All the way up to a couple of thousand, depending on the photographer. And again, that's an expense you have to think about. Am I ever gonna, this may be a hot, well-known model, but am I ever going to make that money back? Is that a wise investment? If you're a popular book author that's gonna sell a ton of copies, then maybe that's an option.
Yeah. One thing that I have started doing is I will use the Google image search. I had the experience where I had a cover done, published my book, and like a few days, and I made sure that it wasn't an image from Deposit Photos, because those are so used by indie authors. I wanted it to be a little more unique. But what happened, and I was working with my cover designer, and she was using either iStock or Adobe, one of those, which you have to pay more for. But in the week between her making my cover and it being released, that guy and all of the images of him were uploaded to Deposit Photos. And suddenly my guy in his pose with his shirt open, I noticed on Amazon, I was like, wait a minute. And so I did an image search, and I found 5 other covers with this guy. And so you can use like image.google.com, put in the photo that you found, and see if there are other covers that are already using that guy. And because, you know, like, you don't want him hooking up with all kinds of women in other books, right? I don't. All right, are you ready, Stephanie?
It's very common, but that goes back to how we took that couple photo into the now. I mean, you can recognize it, but it's pretty different than the original photo, and that's key. Is if it's the same guy, a lot of cover designers will take those very popular stock photos, and they may do like a face swap with another image. And so now there's kind of something familiar about that, but because it has a different face, it's a little bit unique. And so a good cover designer can do those things for you as well. So that's what we're going to do with Tammy's guy. So we're going to look for a guy in the same position and do a face swap to get that expression we want out of it. All right, so I see a question from Colleen. Supply our cover designers with images. Same thing for commissioned pieces of art. For instance, if I were to work with an artist who is not a cover designer, may I bring that artwork to a book cover designer like you to make artwork into a cover? Absolutely. Make sure you have a license agreement with the artist. And basically what that means is the artist can say, here is the image. I give a license for book cover. You can find a bunch of lingo online. And just say, hey, this artist gave me permission to use this image on my book cover. And they're going to need to specify what you can use that image. So you can say use for my book cover and promotional aspects of my book. And so that will cover putting your book cover on any type of promotional marketing graphics that you create. So think about little terms on how you want to use that image, and get them to write a statement saying you have the license for that. All right, another question piggybacking on that. What about using your own photographs and provided that all releases are properly done? Absolutely, you can do that. One of the biggest things to do now, this isn't as big of a deal as it was 5 or 10 years ago because of technology is so advanced now. But one of the things you have to worry about is the resolution high enough for your book cover? Okay, so what is resolution? That basically means how many pixels per square inch are there in your image. So if the image was taken like with a cell phone on a very low setting, the resolution may not be high enough. However, most camera phones, as long as they're fairly modern, take pictures good enough to use on a book cover. So if you have an image in mind, take it to your book cover designer and say, hey, is the resolution on this good enough? And they can tell you yes or no. So, okay, so I've got Canva up. So are we ready to share my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So, all right, this is where I might stumble a little bit because, like I said, I don't use Canva all that much. Danny, since you're pretty familiar with Canva, you can walk me through it when I get stuck. So when you go there, how do you usually start? So you can create a blank book cover here. Is this how you usually do it?
I would say, I mean, yes, this is how I do it. So I create a design, I go to book cover. They've got a particular size, the 1410 by 2250 pixels.
I do not like that.
I prefer the squatter one, but it doesn't matter. We can.
Yes.
So do you want to do that?
I am going to show you. All right. So when I design covers, I do in what's known as 6x9. And I'm going to tell you what the dimensions are. So 6x9 at 300. And so the dimensions of that particular size is going to be 1800 by 2700. Yeah. So if you design a book cover, I would recommend that size. So
go up to create a design. Oh, okay.
Okay. So we can go
create design up at the top right.
All right, so we're going to do that and custom size.
Correct.
Okay, so we are going to go 1800 by 2700 and create new. So now the dimensions of this book cover are equal to what we did in Photoshop. Okay, so with Canva, you'll notice that they have a whole bunch of templates that you can use. If you want to play around and be familiar with it, Canva, you can opt to choose a template. But remember, templates are base designs in that design can be seen on many different things. So if we did a search for book covers, it's going to come up with a whole bunch of book covers. But the thing is, you may have seen this particular book cover on many different books. So using one of the templates that they have may not be the best thing because you're going to, the title may be different.
Put in romance book cover.
Oh, there we go.
If what we come up with, because let's see. So the one thing I wondered is, they're not terrible designs. If you found one that had a font that you liked, you could swap things out. Like I notice you're hovering over "Love Never Ends." You said you have an illustration that you wanted to play with.
Oh, right. I have a subscription to this. I am not logged into the right one, obviously. So
okay, well, this is never mind.
No, I don't want to invite
you. You don't want to do that.
All right, let's see.
No, let's
it's okay. I have it. I will go in and cancel it. I know I have a subscription already. I just obviously didn't sign it in. So let me
here, you want to stop sharing while you're filling in all your stuff?
That was just my my zip code. If anybody wants to come to Florida and visit me, come right ahead. So it's all right. All right, so just after this, when we end here, say, go cancel that.
Go cancel.
So,
right. Okay.
So let me pull that up again. All right, romance book cover. All right, so all right, so love never ends. So my next book cover that I was going to present to Tammy was using some stock illustrated kind of like this. And let's say we liked this particular type. So let's go ahead and put our author name in. Now, for this template, I feel like this author name is a bit too small. So there's things that we can do to change it. So I just have, these are all kind of similar layers like I was talking about in Photoshop. So each little element is on its own layer. So you just got to select it and move it around to where you want it. So this is the people and these little hearts are separate. So think about this goes back to the leaves and the little ornaments that we added. What can you do to add to your cover to make it a little bit more interesting? So the base template, we can make a few changes. We're going to make the author name a little big because I think that is way too small. We can change the font. Let's say that you wanted, let's see, there's no below, but Bebis New is a good font. Helvetica is a good font. So you can look at all of these different font options. Now, with this being in Canva, and as long as you have Canva Pro, all of these fonts that they provide should have a commercial license to them. So you are good to use these. So I'm just going to keep it in that. And Tammy's title, we're going to put in, we're going to do it kind of the same way they have here. We're going to do sometimes. Okay, that's a little too short for the title. And so we're going to move it over. Now, can anybody tell me what is wrong with the word sometimes? Does anybody recognize any problem? Anybody? All right, so I'm going to tell you.
The letters aren't touching.
Thank you. Yes, that's exactly what I needed somebody to say. The letters aren't touching. This is a very common mistake with people who do covers in Canva, and they do not kern the letters. With type that is in a script format, you are going to need to do a lot of manual kerning. Now, the problem with Canva is that anybody who's familiar with Canva, can you kern? Not that I know of. Okay. So in this situation in Photoshop, what I would do is I would change the kerning, which means that I would reduce the space between the E and the S. So the E and the S are touching. I reduce the space between the E and the T so that the E and the T are touching. So when you have a script font, it's meant to flow together. So think about if you learn to write in cursive. I know a lot of people these days are not learning cursive, but if you are old school like me and you learn to write cursive, we know our letters are meant to join. And this does not join. So in Canva,
you actually can, okay, you're going to say you can join them. You know that, right?
How do you do it in Canva?
You click on, I think it's the up down arrow. No, go into the toolbar where the three little lines are and it shows the height. So go to, beside effects, to the left of effects. That's the right of effects, to the left of effects. And it will show, click on that. Is it not
spacing? Letter spacing.
Letter
Yeah,
spacing.
there we go.
Zoom them.
All right. So letter spacing is where we can join them together.
A little better.
Do you know if you can do it to individual letters?
As far as I know, you would have to put each individual letter in on its own, which would be a nice.
Okay. That's what I was going to tell you to do. Now, we took the letter spacing down to -27. This looks pretty good. For me personally, I want a little bit of less space between the S and the OM, and then a little less space between the ME and then the TI, and then definitely the ES. So with script
Ashley
fonts, you're
says
going to
if
have
you
to work
highlight
on.
them. Ashley says if you highlight them, you can do individual letters.
Okay, let's see.
Right. Now,
See,
and
we're
maybe,
learning here. Okay.
so highlight the letter, maybe the I. Oh, I see. Right. You just did it with that.
Let's see. Yeah, it's still changing the whole thing.
Whole thing.
So what I would do in this situation is I'm going to copy this. Can you duplicate this? Okay. So in this situation, what I would do is exactly what Danny said, is that you would have to have each individual letter in its own little text box. So that's what I would do, just to get it to be the way I want, because I am very particular about those things. So I would just keep on doing this.
Or
we're not
maybe
going to
choose
do
a
this
different
for
font.
everything.
Or maybe choose a different font that actually does what you want.
Yes, exactly. That's another option. Not all fonts, but I will tell you this, a lot of fonts we're going to have to do, if they're script, a lot of fonts we're going to have to do this with. So we're just going to quickly do, we're not going to worry about this too much, but we're just going to get sometimes. So I would just position that kind of there. And then we'll delete that. All right. And so you can play around with the placement just to get that right. All right. So sometimes selecting boxes can be a pain, just like Photoshop. All right. And I think I'm going to make this bigger, love. And let's take this up to probably even bigger. So there's a couple ways you can change the size of something, and then you can rotate and tilt and do lots of different things to it. And then we're going to say isn't, and I may make isn't a little bit smaller. And you'll notice that I just made that lowercase. Again, that's another little thing that you can do to play around with your fonts. And then we're just going to duplicate this, and we're going to type in our last one, isn't enough. Okay, so this is how you can kind of lay out your type in, and I'd probably move things up. Then when you have a whole lot of boxes here, it can get a little confusing. So you just have to kind of play. Now, is there like a layer stack that you can see, for those of you familiar with this in Photoshop?
Go to position. In the toolbar, there's a line that says position, edit image right across position, and it'll show you two different ways that you can see the layers.
Perfect. There you go. All right, so that's good to know. So make sure you use that feature when you're playing, moving things around and wanting to select something that is underneath a stack. In Photoshop, it shows you all your layers visually, so you can easily grasp. And if you're smart, not like me, you name your layers so you know what layer is what, so you can grab something. All right, so let's say you wanted a different couple. Now I'm going to show you some of the options that I have, and I actually want to change the color of these hearts to this kind of green. So I'm going to change that because I think that will make the hearts nice. I'm going to show you a couple of the images that I found that I really liked, and they would need a little bit of work on them. So I'm not going to work on them here. But
we're not seeing those.
Yeah, I've got to find them.
Oh, okay. I thought you had clicked on the link.
I am on my other screen trying to find them because I have them up along with several other things. So let me find beautiful pregnant woman. All right, so this image right here. I thought this was beautiful. One of the things Tammy mentioned is that I believe this was right. She had some highlights in her hair. So I can change those colors. I liked that she was kind of had a solemn expression and she was looking down. And so we can tweak this to remove the leaves. We don't have to use the leaves, but we can keep them if we want. So I'm going to sign in and download this image. Now, when you are downloading images, most of your photographs are going to be what's known as a JPEG, which is just a file type. A JPEG is what's known as a raster file. So it's comprised of a bunch of little dots. So it's what most of your, all of your photos are going to be raster images. PNG is also raster, but PNG can be transparent, so you can have it on a clear background. So for any images that you want to overlay on top of them, PNGs are great because they can have that clear background, whereas JPEGs, you would have to go in and remove the background. Now, an EPS file is a little different, and not all sites offer EPS files, but EPS is what's known as a vector. So instead of being made up of a lot of little dots, it's a mathematical formula. I don't even understand that part of it. I just know that I can make it as large or as small as I want. Whereas raster images is based on dots per inch. So you can only take a raster image up so big. So you wouldn't be able to use just something on your phone and put it on a large billboard. So that's something to think about. But with vector or EPS files, they are mathematical based. So we can take them as large as we want them. So I like to work in vector. So I'm going to download that one.
Canva doesn't accept EPS files.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. But I am going to download this because we are going to open it up in another program. I'm going to remove the leaves and we'll save it as a PNG. Canva, I'm assuming, allows PNGs, right?
Yes, it does. PNGs,
okay.
JPEGs, and PDF.
All right. So perfect. All right, so we are going to open this up real quick and I'm going to save it as a PNG. So I'm going to do a couple things here real quick. We're just going to remove these leaves. I may come back in and decide to put them back in, but we're just going to save this image as a PNG. So,
and her hair is shorter, by the way.
Okay, we will I won't do that for this one, but in the next version that I show you, I'll remove this part that's behind her body right here, just so it'll be shorter. So we are going to export as the PNG. Okay, all right. And so now going back to Canva, we are going to import her and upload a file. And I'm going to upload that file that I just created. And it now brings that file into your little resources here. So as soon as it is done uploading, we will put her in. And the thing I like about this image too is that I don't really have to recolor her because I feel like she already matches the background a pretty great detail. All right, so let's edit photo. And then there's certain things that you can do in Canva. You can add different effects. You can remove backgrounds. You can change colors. So there's a lot of things that you can do. If you're using a stock image, always change the color somehow just so you can so it doesn't look like a stock image. Okay, so we're going to make her a little bit smaller and bring her down here. Okay, and now we need a guy to go right here. Now I have another image of a guy. Now this particular guy is drawn by the same, isn't drawn by the same artist. So sometimes when you're finding these stock images, you have to determine how you can get these two images to match. So we're just going to use, let's see, I had one picked out. We're just going to use this guy right here. I don't think he's got the vibe that we're going for, but for demonstration purposes only, we're just going to use him real quick. Let me open him. And we are going to open him. So I am just going to, certain images are really weird with how they were created. So you just have to know what you can delete and not delete out of the background. And this is one of the things you can do in Canva. I just prefer to do it here.
Oh,
So,
you get much better. It'll just be cleaner here.
Yes,
for sure, than Canva. Canva does a pretty darn good job removing backgrounds, but sometimes not perfectly.
So the key is just getting rid of all of these leaves behind him. And this is, when I say vector, this is a vector image. So each little thing is just a bunch of points, and we can make this as big as possible. Now, the style of illustration, when you're combining these types of images with other images, the styles are not going to be the same, but there's certain things that you can do to make them look the same. Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time with it, but the easiest way to make sure your images match is use the same artist, use the same, they all have, similar styles. So you can look at that artist to see if they have any guy images. But for the most part, I think we can get these two to work together. I am lost here on my thing. And we are going to upload this dude. Which one was it? There we go. All right, so he's uploading. And so this is how you would use your own images in Canva. Okay, so now we've got our dude. Now, I don't want him looking at the girl. So quickly, I want to flip him. So we are going to flip him horizontally, and then we are going to put him towards the back. Okay, so we want him kind of behind our girl. Now, this is a little rough. He needs to be a little bit bigger, and we'll need to move our type around a little bit. I'm going to move the word enough over just so we can have him more like here. So here we are giving our couple that tension because they're back to back. Okay. And so with illustrated kind of, and we would move sometimes up, but since we've got like 4 or 5 little bits, that will be a pain, but you'll get the idea. So this is how we can use Canva. Now, let's change the background. So we can keep it the same, but we want to change the color and see how using these just different filters, how it kind of changes the dynamic of the cover. We're going to look for maybe a green tone, and that matches the green here. So you can do things like that. And when we talked about the leaves that were behind our girl, how can we bring those back in? So we're going to quickly just ungroup those. We're going to ungroup that. I'm going to delete her out. I'm going to delete this out. We're going to delete this portion out. We're going to select all this white. Same fill color. I'm going to delete that out. So I'm going to just toss these leaves. I'm going to save them as a PNG. And again, this goes back to how much is too much in a design. Now, if you use Canva Pro, you can have Canva search. You can search in the resources that Canva has, and you could find leaves and that you could add into the background very easily, just like what I'm doing here. So we are going to upload. We're going to upload those leaves. And we are going to add those into our file. And we can either drop those in the background. We're going to drop them to the very back, send to back. And I'm actually going to remove the heart. So you can keep things on your little thing here, and then you can just remove them if you decide you don't want them. And then I think we're going to duplicate this layer. We're going to duplicate, and then we're going to flip it. And then we're just going to position it on the other side. And there you go. There's a quick cover in Canva.
Woohoo! Wow.
Okay. Any
Whoa.
questions? And I kind of stuck to a time. So
That is amazing. That's not a terrible cover.
It's not. It could easily work. The cool thing is that I would do a little work to the guy. He's a little bit too orange in the face, and to work for Tammy, he would need the blonde hair. But the thing I like about them is that you are creating that tension. We can see she's pregnant. They're not looking at each other. And along with the title, sometimes love isn't enough. You know, we get that sort of tension that we can't always find in photos. You know, there's a lot of happy people in photos, and we can't necessarily build that tension in a book cover like we would want. So, you know, you could definitely build decent book covers in Canva.
And one of the reasons why I really encourage folks to learn how to use Canva to do book covers is so that you can do some testing eventually. Like, you could test before you hire your cover designer, because if you can't decide, do you want to stop sharing when you've done that, and then we can.
Yes,
I love this. I'm like, I want to go in and play with it. How do we take this and make it into a print? You export it as a JPEG for your ebook cover. You can also use Canva to make your print wrap. It just takes a little bit of fiddling, but both Amazon and Ingram Spark give you templates, so it'll show you what your spine has to be. But in terms of testing, if you were like last week, we saw that Tammy, in her subgenre, the contemporary romance, there were a variety of different styles that are common in the top 100. Tammy liked this particular style that Steph did. But you could always create in Canva some dummy up some covers, illustrated, the kind that have the split the way she did it, the kind with a couple, the kind with just a guy, and run some Facebook ads to see which is the clickiest, which one is going to grab the readers that you're hoping to get, and make a decision that way. So.
and going back to how to make it into print, for KDP, what you would need to do, you would need a template. So you can go to KDP and download your template. So you have binding type. I stopped sharing. Let me share again real quick. You have binding type. So in most cases, it's going to be a paperback. In most cases, the interior type is going to be black and white. Paper type, choose between cream or white. I prefer white. Most people prefer cream. It's kind of funny. So that's a preference thing. Inches, and whatever your book size is.
One of the questions earlier was, what is the most common paperback trim size in your experience?
Okay, in romance, 5.5 by 8.5 is probably the most common size I do. I prefer 5.25 by 8. My books I have actually done in 5 by 8, but I'm thinking about redoing them in 5.25 by 8. And why is that? Is because the aspect ratio of 5.25 by 8 is not too far off the aspect ratio that I create for the ebook cover, that 6 by 9 size, that 1800 by 2700. They have a very similar aspect ratio, so they're not that far off. Whereas if you do 5 by 8 or 5.5 by 8.5, they're a little bit longer. So they don't have that perfect size that I prefer. But the most important thing about your cover, your full wrap, is it needs to be the exact page count of your formatted interior. That's very important because the spine is dependent upon the page count and the paper color. So if you told your cover designer you have a 300 page book using cream paper, they're going to download a template that is cream paper at 300, and that's going to give us a spine width of 3/4 of an inch. Okay, now let's change that to white, recalculate it. Suddenly our spine is just 0.676, so it's smaller using white paper. So what's going to happen if you tell your cover designer cream paper but you select white, or you tell them your page count was 300 and in actuality it's 400, and they generated the template based on the information you provide them, there's going to be a mismatch, and KDP is going to kick back your cover, or the spine is not going to print properly. So that page count is, this is a common question I get. Oh, I kind of have an idea how long my book is. I'm going to give you kind of this rough estimate of a page count. Unfortunately, that's not the way it works. So something to keep in mind. Now, if you wanted to design your own covers, but you maybe wanted to not take the time to create your own wraps, there are some cover artists who will just do the print wrap for you, which may save you a lot of headache. That's something that I can easily do. They generally charge anywhere between $25 and $50 for the full wrap, depending on how much design you wanted on it. So that's always something to do, to have someone else to do your full wrap, because there are some technical things to it that if you don't have the knowledge of it can drive you a little crazy, but it's always a good thing to learn how to do it yourself if you want.
So, okay, so now I have another question, and I realize we are at time, but you've just opened another question for me.
Of course.
If I hire Sarah to do my ebook cover, but she's going to charge me $200 to do a paper wrap, the paperback wrap, I can take the cover that I have paid her to design and give it to you and pay you $50, or?
You have to ask her. Some designers may have a clause in the contract that states they have to do the print wrap for you. So you would really probably want to check their permissions to determine whether or not they would allow someone else to do the print wrap. So.
We need a checklist before we hire our cover designer to say,
good idea.
Can I have permission to do my own paperbacks? And will you provide me with the fonts? And will you provide me with the links to the original photographs so that I can use them in my,
exactly. License, everything. That's a good idea to have a little checklist. So
yeah. Okay. Sarah says her designer has that in her contract. She's not allowed to do anything to her covers. She has to do all of it. There you go.
That is very common, actually. A lot of art. I don't consider myself an artist, although most people do. I consider myself a professional layout, even though I can draw, and I do draw characters. That term, because my dad was super artistic, and so to call myself artistic sometimes, because I know some people are just and fantasy designers, they're way out there. But a lot of cover designers will say, you can't mess with that. And that's something that I do say for that front cover. If you need any tweaks, they need to come through me, because what happens is that this is our kind of our work. This is our baby. So if you go in and make changes yourself, we may not necessarily agree with those changes. And that's why a lot of artists will come in and say, hey, you can't make any changes. Now, some people will just say you can't make any changes to the front cover, but you can make your full wrap yourself. I do that. I tell people, you can keep as long as you keep the artwork on the cover the same, you can create your own print wrap. Just on the copyright page, put front cover design by Alt19 Creative, and not include the full wrap as part of that design statement. So,
thank you. Okay, any other questions before we wrap this up?
And just Tammy and Danny, I will be in contact in over the next couple of days with those kind of finished products. And I'll do a video once Tammy decides what direction she wants, showing the final product. So
Cool. Deas has her hand up, so I'm thinking there is a question.
I was curious, since we can't do the print cover until we've fully formatted the book, and normally fully formatting the book is like the last thing you do.
yes.
How do we get the print covers?
Okay. So what I do with my clients that I know are doing a print cover, I'm going to share my screen real quick. I do what's called a mock-up. Okay. Oh, wrong thing. Share screen. So what I do is I'm going to quickly show you before when I'm designing the cover for a client, I go ahead and do a mock-up. Okay. And that mock-up is just my standard cover size, my 6x9 with my 1-inch spine. And I go ahead and design the back cover. Okay. So this is a cover that I recently did for Jenny Proctor. And I went ahead and designed the whole entire cover. So I had the back cover pretty much designed already. So when she told me her page count and her book trim size, I just had to go in and make a few tweaks to make it work for her page count. And that is not the right one. For her page count with her final blurb. Oh, that should be it. It's just not coming up. All right. So even though these look almost identical, there are some differences. You can see the text is a little aligned differently. So this PDF right here is the one that is print ready for KDP. And then this one right here is one that I use to create the mock-ups. So when she gives me her final page count, I usually say I can get that turned around in a day or so. So make sure you know how many days your cover designer needs in order to create that print wrap. So some designers will not do a mock-up like this. I prefer to do it this way because one of the things that I do with all my clients is I provide a bunch of different 3D mock-ups. And so it's just a bunch of different layouts of the cover with the back cover that they can use for marketing purposes. So here's an example of one. It has an ebook cover, the spine, the back cover, and what it looks like on a phone. And I can do this without knowing the page count or anything. And so I have it ready for when we do have the page count. So.
Wow. Wow. Okay. One more thing to ask. But so, and here's the other thing though, Deas and everybody else, you don't have to be ready for your paperback. Even if you've got the package, like you could go back to Stephanie 2 months later, 3 months later, or whoever your cover designer is and say, now I'm ready for the paperback. Now I've got that. So don't feel pressured.
Yeah. And sometimes you may not even have your book written yet. You wanted the cover for inspiration, and you may not have that full wrap for a year. And that's fine. I allow you to pay for your full wrap separate. So you can just pay for your ebook cover first. And then when you're ready for the full wrap, you can let me know and pay for it. And then, yeah, that can come at any time. Always ask your cover designer because all of them work a little bit differently.
I think the big lesson here is we are the ones hiring the cover designer. And as much as we rely on them and want, we feel beholden to them because they're creating this thing that's so important to us, they work for us. And it's good to be respectful and acknowledge that their time is valuable. We are not paying them $12 an hour. So, I have a much clearer understanding now also of why a cover is expensive. Well, expensive, that's the wrong word, but why they are hundreds of dollars and not $50.
And there are some that are $50, but you have to question quality and question licensing And also too, you can find great cover artists in countries where the standard of living is a little bit lower. And so that's another thing. But when you're working with those type of artists, a lot of times there is some communication issues. So that's another thing you have to think about. If you're going to hire someone that is in your country, if you're in the US, if you're going to hire a US artist, know that their prices are going to be a little bit more. You're also going to pay a little bit more for someone who has a lot of experience and knows all the little nuances with cover design. So that, you know, those are definitely something to think about.
Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Fun. So much fun. Yeah, let's do
Well,
this.
invite me back anytime. I enjoy this. So anytime y'all ever want to do this again, I am available. So
all right. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. Thanks all the folks who showed up today live to bring the energy to the group and for chatting and engaging. And I will see you all either in another support video from a professional in the romance writer world or over in the community. Thank you.
all right. Bye.